Hey, it's Kathleen Jasper, and I just woke up and checked my email, and I got a question about how to read a score report. And I've been meaning to do a video on this for a long time, so I thought, why not now? Got my coffee. Let's do this. I'm going to show you how to read your score report and how to use that information to better study next time for the exam so that you have success. Let's get started. All right, so when you get your score report, it's going to look something like this, and it'll usually be 2 pages. The first page has your overall score, which we can see here. In this case, this person was taking the PLT, grades K6, 5622, and she received a 146, but the qualifying score is a 160, so she fell short and she did not pass the exam. Now, what about that? How am I supposed to get better if I only see that score? Well, that's why they give you the second page where you can break down your scores by each individual subtest. And in this case, they give you the raw scores. So on the first page, this 146, that's a scale score. And I did a video on scale score versus raw scores, and I'll link that up. But basically, a scale score is your raw score, and they add a formula to it and they make it into a scale score. All big standardized testing companies use scale scoring when they are grading your tests. But if you wanted to see exactly how you did, you can go to the second page where they give you the raw score. Now, what I like to do is get a percentage for this column here, so that you can see exactly how many you got right out of the points that were offered. So for this first one, students as learners here, she got 8 out of 21. So what I'm going to do is divide 8 by 21, and I get 38% or 0.38. So she only got 38% on that particular content category, which is not great. We need to be higher than that. And you can see here that she is way below the range of average performance. Most people who took the test scored somewhere between a 12 out of 21 or a 16 out of 21. So we want to bring that up. So if she were studying again, she would want to really look at that part of the study guide, students as learners, and zero in on some of those skills. Now let's have a look at the second one here, instructional process. You can see that she got 11 out of 21 correct in her raw score, and that's a 52%. Now let's take a look at the next one, which was assessment. So I have 9 out of 14. So just divide 9 by 14. And in this case, she got a 64% correct. And you can see she's right at the bottom of that average performance. I still say she needs to grab a few more points there and be in the mid-range of the average performance. But this one, she did better than the others. I would go back in and look at assessment in the study guide and, fix up those skills and hone in on areas that need to be improved there. And then finally, the last one here, professional development, leadership, and community. She got an 11 out of 14, which is pretty good. That's a 79%. If I round up. And you can see 11 out of 14, she's right there in between the 10 out of 12. So she actually did pretty good on this professional development, leadership, and community. I would still go back in and make sure that I understand this, but that's the strength of the test in terms of this test taker. So she did pretty good on that one. Maybe she could grab a couple more points that would help her in the other areas. Now, this last piece here is the analysis of instructional scenarios. This is the constructed response portion of the PLT, the 5622. And she got a 6 out of 16. And you can see that is way below the average. So she definitely needs to work on her writing when it comes to this test. Remember, the PLT, Principles of Learning and Teaching, has a constructed response portion that's worth 25% of the overall grade on the exam. And so she definitely needs to get this up. I would say she needs at least an 11 out of 16. And I have a lot of videos on how to construct your response for this particular portion of the exam. But when it comes to the constructed response, you can see that there are 16 points available. Well, each constructed response is worth 2 points. And there are 4 constructed response questions on the exam. So let's think of that in terms of scoring the constructed response. So I'm just going to call it CR here. And there are 4 questions. for the constructed response. And there are a possible 2 points for each question. You could get a 0, you could get a 1, or you could get a 2, right? So if we had 4 questions and the total number of points you get for each question is 2, if that's the best you get, that means that total you get 8 points for the constructed response. Well, you might be saying, why then does it say 16 here? Well, it's 16 because there are 2 graders for your constructed response. Each grader will give you a score out of 8 total. So grader 1 is going to give you up to 8 points. And grader 2 is going to give you up to 8 points. When you add those together, you get 16 points. So you might get, let's just say, this particular person, because let's go back to her score report, she got 6 out of 16. She might have gotten 3 from grader 1 and 3 from grader 2. She might have gotten a 0 on the first constructed response, 2 on the second constructed response, and a 1 on the third constructed response, and a 0 on the fourth constructed response. And so that adds up to 3 points. The same thing with grader 2. So those 2 are combined to get this total number of 16. In this case, this person got a 3 and a 3. Now, it doesn't break it down to tell you, well, what did grader 1 give you and what did grader 2 give you? In this case, between the 2 graders, she got a total of 6 points. And you can ascertain that grader 1 probably gave her 2 to 3 points and grader 2 gave her 2 to 3 points. Now, again, that's pretty low here. We got to bring that up. And so we're going to need to practice our writing there. But just remember that the second page of your score report is going to give you this raw score section. And that's where you can break down how many you got correct out of each section. And it helps when you're going back into study to figure out what exactly do I need to fix up here. And you can see that students as learners is her lowest, and also the constructed response is her lowest. And you always want to shoot for somewhere in between the average performance range. And I say in the middle. You don't want to be on the lower end. For example, you don't just want to be at a 12. You want to be at a 13 or a 14. You don't just want to be at a 14 for this one. You want to be at a 16, 15, something like that. That puts you in the safe zone there. All of my study guides are broken up by the number of questions. And so you can take your raw score by each section of those numbers of questions and figure out how you're doing it. Let me show you what I mean by that. All right, so this is my PLT book for the Praxis 5622. So that's the test that we were looking on when it came to her score report. And according to the score report, she was very low in students as learners. And that's this first category here. All right. Now, I do have practice test questions that are simply for that particular content category. At the end of each content category, I have 10 questions just for that. So the first step would be to go in and really review all of these questions and review the answer explanations, because the answer explanations have all of that really important information. Now, beyond that, if I go to the practice tests and I want to kind of section out my skills because I know I'm low in the area of students as learners, well, our practice tests are sectioned out by content category. So you can see here we have the test questions, right? Okay, that's great. But what's really important is the content category. And you can see here that I have each question sectioned out for content category. Now, for the students as learners, there are 21 questions on the actual exam. Well, check it out. There are 21 questions for my students as learners as well. Do you see how this is content category 1 right here? I have 21 questions for that. So if you go in and you take the practice test, you can say, okay, I need at least a 12 to 16 to be in the average range. So I know when I'm taking this practice test that once I get 1 through 21, I need to get at least, I would say, 13 to 14 correct out of those first 21 questions. Now you can see content category 2 right here starts at number 22. And so I would say, okay, I need at least 14 out of 18 of those 21 questions. And you can see that goes all the way to 42, which is 21 questions. So my study guides are sectioned out exactly how the test is sectioned out. There are the same numbers for the content categories as there are on your score report and on the actual test, so you can study more effectively that way. Now, I know how you guys are addicted to practice tests, and everybody just wants to do all these practice test questions over and over again. But if you only scored a 38% as students, as learners, we got to go back and really review that information. So we need to be inside the book looking at all of this information, because you can't just take practice tests over and over again. So this is really important stuff that you should read. Yes, it's important to relate it to the test questions because you're asked test questions on the exam. However, you got to get in here and understand transfer and self-efficacy, because that's all part of content category 1. And you might not get the exact same questions. In fact, you won't get the exact same questions that I have in my study guide. It's impossible to know what test you're going to get, and you're not allowed to have the same questions anyways. But that's why all the information in the front of the book is just as important as the practice test. I know nobody listens to me. They just want to take practice tests over and over again. But if you're low, you have to learn these particular processes in student learning so that you can answer any question that you get on the exam. Okay, so you can use this method for any score report for any test. So make sure you look at the scale score. That'll tell you whether or not you passed, but then go to that second page and break down those raw scores so you can see exactly where you need to pinpoint your skills. And remember, doing practice tests over and over again doesn't work. Be sure that you understand the content categories, the skills, and the concepts assessed on the exam in depth so that you can answer any question you're given on test day. I've linked up a bunch of videos in the description below that go over the constructed response and some other areas that I mentioned on this test. So be sure to check those out and let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have an awesome day.